looking like they're connecting, but I think pretty much everyone else is on, which is great. So there was a couple of housekeeping things. There's one person connecting, it just doesn't seem to be working for them. So, but before I launch into the housekeeping, thanks for joining. And before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're coming to you, at least from today, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Thanks for joining. My name's Tenille. You can hopefully see that on the screen. And I'm chatting with Clive Hodson today, and you can probably see him and his name there before if you haven't met us. There we are.
Yeah, that's my ghostly look.
So just a couple of housekeeping things. If you wouldn't mind turning off your... It's lovely to see you. I feel a bit bad asking you to turn off your cameras and mute, but it's just a bit of standard protocol. And also the session's being recorded, so if you don't want to be involved in that or have yourself shown or whatnot, that's just make sure it's off. The session will go for about 45 minutes, and then at the end, if there's time for some questions, you can pop your camera and mute, take mute off if you like to ask a question. Otherwise, you can pop it in the chat during the session. Sorry, that's pretty much all the nitty-gritty bits that I need to go through. If you want to give a massive shout out to WAM for organising this session, and to Claire in particular, and Honor as well. You saw them both a little bit earlier. So big shout out to WAM for putting on these sessions, massive effort, and there's been others during this lockdown time as well. And thanks for inviting myself and Clive for taking part. So I'm Tenille. APRA AMCOS has been my thing for about 18.5 years now. And I'm joined by Clive Hodson from Perfect Pitch Publishing. Some of you may have met Clive around the traps at WAMCon or whatnot. Sorry, a little bit, if you haven't met me before, I've been at APRA AMCOS for that long, 18.5 years, and at North Metropolitan TAFE for about 13, lecturing in the music business department. And I'm also a songwriter, composer, performer as well. So that's very dear to my heart. Songwriting is something that I just do all the time, and I love it to bits. And before this, voluntary work at RTR and WAM and Access 31 and whatnot. So I might just get Clive, because he's the, I believe, managing director, or correct me on your title, of Perfect Pitch Publishing, which is an independent Australian music publisher with offices in both Perth and the Gold Coast, and they manage roughly around 25,000 plus copyrights. And Clive is also on the AMCOS board and the WAM board. So Clive, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got into publishing, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, well, thanks, Tenille, and welcome everyone. This is great. I've actually had a day of these type of meetings with AMCOS, in fact. So I'm used to having a multitude of people and looking at all the faces and all those sort of things all day and talking to them. So I'm looking forward to imparting some information. Look, I'm what they term as a heritage music industry person. I did actually start off my career in Perth as a musician and played in several bands here. Then from 1978 on, I moved over to the business side of music, and with Polygram Records, and I spent 25 years with Polygram. And then I went to the ABC. From then I was the head of music for the ABC. That's when I first actually came in contact with music publishing in a real way. Before that, I knew that from a record company point of view, we paid publishing royalties, mechanical royalties, but I didn't really know much about it until I got to the ABC and met a very informative lady called Eloise Nolan, who was the head of publishing there. And we worked very closely together, and she taught me really about what publishing is about. I got the bug from there. From there, I went to Shock Music Publishing and ran that for a while, and for 5 years. And then decided to go out on my own with my business partner on the Gold Coast, Peter Patterson. And we've been going for about 10, well, not about 10 years, in fact, last month, and in music publishing. And I've got to say, it's the most exciting part of the music industry. It's the fact that it's taken me all this time to actually discover music publishing is a travesty, in fact. So that's really my history. The thing is that I really value my time in the record side of the business, because it gives me an understanding and empathy of what both sides, what the artist goes through and what the writer goes through, and also to be able to understand the difference between, which is very important, which we will talk about a little bit later on. So that's me. I'm an old bastard.
So before I launch into some questions for Clive, I'll give you a quick copyright and APRA AMCOS 101, just in case some people might be well across all of this stuff, but it's good to remember that it all hinges off copyright law. And if you write or are the publisher of songs, you own and control the copyright of them, which means you can determine how they're used and enables you to collect the royalties from the uses. And if you paid for a sound recording or are the performer on a sound recording, you own the copyright in that sound recording and therefore control the way that is used and can collect royalties for that use. So you may need to join APRA, AMCOS and PPCA. So just because when something's used, so just for an example, I had a video clip many years ago, and it was screened on Rage a few times. So I received APRA royalties because the musical work was used that I wrote. And I also received PPCA royalties because I owned the sound recording of that video clip, the sound recording that was used, and both of those things were used, and there's copyright in both of those things, so I received payment for both of those items. So hopefully that is just the tiniest little bit of background to that. We can go into that more at the end if you want some more general info, basic info. And I think it's crucial, hopefully, you know, everyone here is probably treating their music like a business. I think there's you know, and having things in writing, having contracts in place. There's not enough of that goes on in the music biz, I think. Just having everything locked down and communicating with co-writers and agreeing on percentage splits, that's crucial, you know, to managing your royalties, knowing who actually owns the content, who wrote the songs, and becoming a member of the relevant organisations and then maintaining your membership. So, you know, registering the songs is crucial and in a timely manner. So, because all of this stuff, there's a lot of just royalty collection that's happening pretty automatically, thankfully, due to processes set up, but that's only if you are a member and if you've registered your songs, you know, so that they can just auto match when Spotify's streaming them or whoever's using them, they get matched up. And you know, and that's how we collect, APRA AMCOS collects broadcast information from radio stations, TV and streaming services. So it's just so crucial. I guess the main thing is working out with your co-writers who owns the songs, making sure those songs are registered so that they do get picked up if they're being used. And in terms of, so all of that stuff just happens behind the scenes because the streaming services, Spotify reports to APRA AMCOS, radio stations report, TV stations report to APRA AMCOS what they're doing. You do need to keep track of your live performance royalties. So, you know, if you're performing live, you do have to put in a performance report telling APRA where you've performed. And those royalties, you know, a lot of people think, oh, well, I got paid from the venue for performing, but that's a different fee. That's your fee for entertaining and for performing, basically, for knowing your instrument and performing. But if you happen to write the songs, then that's a whole other skill and you're entitled to a royalty payment from that. And it's collected from the venues. The venues all have to pay a license every year to have music in their venue. And so you put in a performance report. So that's the thing that you're responsible really in terms of royalties. You have to track that. You have to report that. And good news is that finally we have an app. We have an app finally, after 10 years or so. But we do have an app, and very, very soon, like next month, you'll be able to do your performance reports via the app, which is amazing. And the app's available now if you want to have a go and register songs, but it's being updated to include the performance report. So that's all. You can deal directly with APRA AMCOS and ensure that those royalties reach you. So what then does a publisher do, Clive, that APRA AMCOS does not do?
Well, look, I mean, thanks, Tenille. I think the most important thing is that publishers work very closely with APRA AMCOS. In fact, the board is made up of APRA is made up of writer members and of publishers. The AMCOS board is made up of publishers, both independent and also major publishers. So we're very, very, very tightly connected. It's not even dotted line. There's a major line there between the two, and we work very closely together. The thing is that APRA, and I have to put you know, a bit of a shout out to APRA here, is probably one of the most, if not the most efficient performing rights organisation in the world, and the fees that they're actually taken are probably one of the lowest as well. So it's an incredibly well-run organisation, and getting better all the time, particularly with the new program that'll be coming online very soon. But what a publisher does is effectively it's a doubling over of what APRA does, but it takes care of all your publishing rights that are after registration. So that includes finding opportunities for your music and making sure you're getting paid for it. Also making sure that the registrations are done in the right way and following those up. And particularly in Australia, but also in overseas with our affiliates, or if you're with a major publishing company with their own companies overseas. So it's the big business side of income. So when a writer is paid or streamed throughout the world, the publisher, if you're signed with a publisher, they're able to chase that up and make sure that it happens. If you happen to have a television commercial that is a global thing, or through film or television, then it is actually made sure that those cue sheets are available to the other publishers, and they can claim back through the PROs as well. We'll be going into a bit more of that a little bit later on. They're also about nurturing and developing singer-songwriters, working on collaborations with other writers. I think one of the most important things, if you are a songwriter, is that you have the opportunity to not only write by yourself, but also write with other people, not necessarily in your own band, but also write with people outside. And what that does is it broadens your ability to be able to write all different types of music, all different genres and all that sort of stuff. So that putting songwriters together and building the repertoire, so it builds your repertoire as a writer, builds your repertoire even further in your catalogue. And after all, I mean, I think it was said to me once that, you know, publishing is a superannuation of the writer. And it's absolutely true. It's the gift that keeps on giving, and you write great songs and they get covered, or they get used in advertising or in a film. It just keeps generating revenue, which is fantastic. So it's a wonderful side of the business. So that's basically what a publisher does.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Yeah.
And so when would someone, you probably get contacted by a lot of people, I'm assuming, asking about publishing and about Perfect Pitch publishing. So when do you think people need to start thinking about a publisher?
Well, you know, I think there is a whole stack of things here. A songwriter spends the majority of their time on the right side of their brain. I'm not saying they don't have a left side of the brain. It's great, everyone has a bit of a balance, but ultimately the creative side of a person is the right side of the brain, and spending that creative time and putting all the elements together in order to make that creative work. The songwriting I'm talking about here is sometimes you will get to a level where a publisher can be a part of your team and help you develop as a songwriter, and be the left-hand side of the brain, which is the business side of the brain. So let's do an example here, and I've just had this down. you'll get to a certain stage in your career where a publishing company may be there. And I'm not saying that the first song you write, all of a sudden you're out there looking for a publisher. The publisher is not looking for you. So you've got to give them a reason to sign you. There's got to be some reason. So let's say you've got a YouTube channel and you're working hard on your social media, you've got a SoundCloud channel, you've got all that, you're getting comments, likes, shares, etc., etc. And you're gigging a lot. Well, you are now a little bit. And you're developing a fan base, and your work is starting to get on independent, in RTR and getting some radio play. That starts to generate an interest and something that you can actually submit then to a publisher and say, well, look, I've got this audience thing, they're following me, I'm playing original music, I'm writing these songs, I'm getting played on radio, look at the likes I'm getting on my SoundCloud and YouTube channel, I've got all these things together, and it really builds a very solid base for a publisher to be able to look at you and go, hey, maybe there is something here. Ultimately, it comes down to, there's millions of people writing songs, and you've got to write the best song you possibly can. And hopefully that song is actually going to grab the attention of a publisher at some particular point in time. Can I just say, my mantra is there's a time and place for every song, and they come into the most unlikely places. So I believe that you've got to just keep writing the best you possibly can, and just keep working on all the elements that help you create a profile in order for you to be able to engage with a publisher and get an interest from a publisher point of view. So the feedback you receive from early stages as a songwriter is the key indicator for your audience. So once your audience is there, that's what actually sells music, an audience. That's what you got to do. So that's the best place to start.
Cool. Writing songs. I think everyone here.
Writing great songs.
Yeah, writing great songs. And so what about now, Claire and Honor? I'm not sure. I don't have the chat screen in front of me, so I'll just keep plowing through because there's several questions we've got, and then I'll check out when there's a bit later on. But if I want my music in a film, Clive, if you can do that, a television or advertising or video game or whatnot, how does that happen?
Well, first of all, I should go back a little bit here and just say, you don't have to sign to a publisher to be successful. It's not all about the publisher. In fact, making sure that you're registered with APRA AMCOS is probably the first and the most important part of all, because that gives you that protection and understanding. Wherever it's used in the world, it will be found because you're given an international number plus a local number, which is your DNA, if you like. So that's very important. Now, when it comes to putting music into film, television, advertising, you could also do this yourself. But, and this is a huge but, can you imagine that, that a film, a television commercial, advertising agency, or a TV station is inundated with people sending their music in and just going, I think this is the best thing, and this would be great for a car ad, this would be great for this refrigerator ad, this would be great for your home and away, or whatever it happens to be. And I'm sorry, but you're just going to get blocked straight away because, first of all, it's about human resources. They don't have the time to be able to sift through all that. This is where a publisher comes in, because that's probably the key area that publishers work in, is the licensing and synchronization of music. They have, on a day-to-day basis, they build relationships with producers and music supervisors and creatives and agencies. That's what they do every day of the week. So there is a trust level that's built up between these people, between the publisher, that they are not going to waste their time. They can react to a brief. They can actually submit music that they believe is going to be suitable for a particular project. So you want your music into film, television, advertising. So what they call that is synchronization, or a license, and everyone calls it sync, which is basically what it is. So that's granted to the holder of the copyright, in particular, composition or recording. allowing basically the person that's using the music, the producer, to synchronize that with any sort of visual media. That's what it's about. Now there are two rights to this, and as I said to you, you can be unsigned and do this. I will get to the unsigned bit in a second. There are two rights that need to be cleared. There's the recording and the publishing. Obviously, if you're not signed to a recording company or you're not signed to a publishing company, then you have both those rights. You own both those rights, and therefore you can license those to whoever you want or whoever wants it. If you are signed to a publisher and or a record company, then you will need to get permission, as you have assigned the rights to the publisher and the record company. They will negotiate on your behalf with the particular media that they're talking about, the producer or the music supervisor. So there's two rights. You've got to make sure there's the recording and there's the publishing. Very two distinct things. They work in tandem. So I always use a CD, and I know that's very old-fashioned, but it's really easy to demonstrate about this is concerned. What you're seeing is a CD, what you're listening to is the sound recording. What's embedded into that CD and sound recording is the publishing. So they're the two key rights that you actually have. Now, there are two sources of income that come from this. One is called when you're licensing anything into synchronization. The first one is the front-end fee, and I stress the word fee because this is not a royalty, it's a fee. And it means you get an upfront fee, a license fee for a song. And that's from both the recording and the publishing. So whenever you, for the record, for whenever your record or publishing company license your music in any sort of media. So basically that is a fee, and it's a negotiated fee. We'll talk about sort of the scope of what sort of fees will be there in a second. But that's the front end fee. So that's one component. The other component is a back end fee. And the back end fee comes about through APRA, which is effectively the money that comes through digital collection agency, through performance royalties, and from broadcast, live performance, live streaming, any of those type of things that you have. So that's an extra set of income. The first part is a negotiated fee, as I said, called a front end royalty. So and by the way, when you're actually licensing any sort of music, I always say to my writers, make sure you do an instrumental version, and probably that's a little bit ambiguous. What I mean is a backing track rather than just putting a instrumental version of your melody over the top. A backing track, because ultimately, in a lot of cases, if there's dialogue in a piece of music and they want to put this in, and they like the song, or they like the backing, they like the feel of it, they can do it without having any conflict with the dialogue that's happening with the actors on the screen. So they're still getting the same thing. The same amount of money is paid, the same amount of fee, the same amount of performance money is actually paid. It doesn't really make any difference whether there's a vocal or not. The only thing that's bruised is probably the vocalist, but that's about it. So that's pretty much where we go as far as how does it happen. Well, the first thing is, as I said, you can do it yourself, and there are a lot of sync agencies that are now spreading out over the last 10 years. There is so many agencies that have now spread out and offering, even the streaming services, in fact, are offering a sync possibility for you, an opportunity. I'd just be wary of those type of things and make sure that you get some legal advice on any sort of contracts that you sign for any sort of synchronization. I would say non-exclusive is definitely the way that you should be looking at these things, so you don't get locked away with your composition. But there are a lot, and I'm more than happy to take questions on that, and even offline as well to answer your questions about the opportunities and the people that perhaps that can be approached if you're not a published writer. But there are a lot of opportunities out there for doing that.
Great. Thank you. So There's a question come through, and I might just say, if you're not sure how to send a chat, which you can down the bottom of your screen, hopefully you can see it. You might need to expand your screen. Down the bottom, one of the icons should say chat. So if you click on that, it will open a window on the right-hand side. And you'll see that you can send, if you click on the 2, you can send it to either the WAM meeting host. I think you'll be able to see all this, or directly to myself or to Claire. Or to Clive or whoever. So a couple of questions have come in, and I don't know if you can see those, Clive, but one says, what are some tips for approaching publishers? So this person is a songwriter with demo recordings and not an artist with an audience.
Okay. Look, I think it always comes down to a great song, and you know, if you catch the imagination of somebody saying, "Look, I really like that." Depending on whether you are a standalone songwriter or you are a singer-songwriter or a band of songwriters, or whatever. From a publishing point of view, I would always say that, particularly now with technology, to make the best possible, and the word demo is almost obsolete. It's like the word album, I think. The quality is really important. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's got to be studio quality, but people, if you're looking at a publishing agreement, I would think the best quality you can possibly make is the best way to do it. How you approach publishers, most publishers will not accept unsolicited material. However, it doesn't stop you from dropping them and giving them an explanation and an understanding of what you're about, what your songwriting is about, what you're trying to achieve. And hopefully, if you do send that out to publishers, just as an aside with this one, well, it's related. Go and do some research about publishers. Have a look at what sort of writers they've got. What sort of repertoire are they looking at? Does your music fit anywhere there? Do you see that they have an understanding of the type of music that you have? I think that's a really worthwhile thing to try and identify a publisher that would probably be more sympathetic to your genre or to your type of writing.
Yeah, and if anyone wanted a list, I mean, Google's amazing. You can Google publishers, but if you go to the AMPAL site, the Australian Music Publishers Association, there is a members section or a members list where it lists all of their members, and you can then click on each. You know, you could just work through that list really and click on each just to get an idea of who the publishers actually are in Australia and what they're doing, and if you're interested in knowing more, perhaps signing up to their mailing lists or whatnot.
Yeah, it's a good resource. It's a one-stop resource, actually, the AMPAL site, because you've got all of the publishers down there, both the majors, independents, and the smaller publishers. So it is ideal. You can click on the link and usually go to their website. So yeah, that's a good tip to know.
Thanks. So there's a couple of more questions. Generally, how long does an exclusive publishing contract extend for?
As long as a publisher can get. Look, I mean, the thing is that if you've got a relationship with a publisher, and it depends on a couple of factors. One is if there is an advance. If there's an advance, obviously that publishing agreement will continue for as long as that advance is, even if it's terminated. You're still under contract until the advance is recouped. The other thing is, and I'm not trying to be evasive about this, but generally, you know, 5 years, 3 to 5 years, and a lot of writers are balking at that sort of thing now. But there are ways of putting in particular clauses which are more about deliveries within a period of time. But I think if you've researched well and you have a good relationship with the publisher, it can be ongoing for many, many years. Most of the writers we've had for a very, very long time. And it's just an ongoing contractual situation with them. So it's a negotiable thing, and it depends who's got the power. If you all really wanted If your tone's an I, for example, you could probably say whatever you wanted, you know. But if you currently don't have much of a profile, or at this stage you're only growing, you're developing, but there's potential there, then you're likely to for the period to be a lot longer, particularly if they're paying you development money, or they see that there's an opportunity to spend more time with you, developing you as a writer. Yeah.
And you just mentioned advances there, and I thought just if you could just clarify what that is and what that's about.
Yeah, if you're an unknown person, even though you're developing, there's a couple of opportunities for you. One is a development advance, which would be giving you money perhaps to go and do demos. They will be recoupable. So to do demos or buy equipment or do touring or something like that. Or there is a sign-on advance, again recoupable, which is when you're an established artist and they're trying to get you across the line from a publishing point of view. I think Lord at one stage, I could be wrong because there's so many different rumors about that, is when she eventually signed, we're talking millions of dollars that she was given. But considering this agreement was actually signed after she's had considerable success both from licensing music, synchronizing music, as well as hits around the world with Royals, that was a fairly easy one to give a big advance to. But if you're holding out for the big advance, I think you need to rethink your strategy, because that doesn't happen very often.
Mm. And what about, we were talking about film and advert and TV series. Just in terms of, like, could you give a ballpark or some sort of indication of how much do you get for a song being used in something like that?
Yeah, and again, not being evasive, you know, how long's a piece of string thing, but it really depends on when you license a piece of music into in any sort of media, whether it's film, television, or advertising. There are certain requirements that the producer or the music supervisor will require: how long they want to use it for, the duration that it'll be used for, whether it's going to be a feature piece of music, whether it's going to be the theme music, or whether it's just going to be background music. So all of these elements come into it. So it could be, for example, it could be anywhere from, let me tell you, I don't believe in the word free. I think copyright has currency and it should always be paid for in some way. It doesn't necessarily have to be a gazillion dollars, but I believe that if there is money being spent on producing something, then the music deserves to have a payment also to recognize. So a few $100s, a few thousand, you know, multiple thousands of dollars. Very rarely in this country will it be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. I can give you an example. In fact, this was done several years ago when I was at Shock and looking after Pete Townshend's catalogue, and from the Who. Who magazine wanted to use Who Are You as a particular piece of music. Obviously, very high profile writer. They wanted to use the recording and the publishing. At that stage, the publishing contract was, I can say it now because it's out of the thing, it was over $100,000. The record company said, well, we'll make that favoured nations. Favoured nations means that whatever I say, it will be the same. So whatever is the greater, it will be equal. So there's let's say $200,000. So the producer went, I can't afford $200,000, but I can't do anything with the publishing. I have to pay the publishing fee because you can't. It's only one person. Pete Townsend wrote it. So you can't have another person writing that song. Excuse me for a second. I'll just get rid of that. Sorry about that. But what they can do, and in this instance, there was no re-record restriction on Pete Townshend's music, so therefore they got a studio band to record the track "Who Are You." Now, what did I think of it? It's irrelevant. It's a really well-known track. It went to air television, Who magazine. It was a no-brainer. It did really well. I think the recording cost was like $15,000 compared to $100,000. They saved themselves a lot of money, and therefore they were able to use that piece of music, and that rolled over several times. Rolling over means that once the license period of 12 months is finished, they could roll it over for another 12 months, and they have to pay the same fee again for that extra 12 months. That's where the contract comes in with all the conditions that you need. So it can be as low as $50, it can be $250, it could be a student film, it could be $50 for a student film, it could be a television commercial for $1,500 or $5,000, you know. So it's really difficult. It's based on, is it a well-known piece of music or is it unknown? If it's well-known, you're going to pay a lot. If it's not well-known, you'll be paid less.
Oh, thank you. I'll flick that back over to the questions that we've had sent in. As a band, we share songwriting and have a formal agreement to share all income. How does that realistically work, as I understand that songwriting is connected with lyrics and vocal melody?
Yeah, lyrics and melody is publishing. If I can take a very old system, which is the bands that tend to stay together, and the bands like U2 and the Beatles, well, probably U2 is a good example, where they share everything right down the middle. So it's everything, you know. So four members, 25% each. That's fine. What has happened in a lot of cases is the publishing is very separate to the record company. From the record company point of view, you will find that everyone is paid the same amount of royalties. So they split it evenly. From a publishing point of view, it will be the melody and the lyrics can be shared equally, or it can be split up, whoever brought the song in, whoever wrote the lyrics. So if you've got people like Bernie Taupin and Elton John, well, Bernie Taupin writes the lyrics, Elton John writes the music, and they split the royalty 50-50. That's the way it goes. And generally that would be it. If you're in a band, that's entirely up to you how you do it. But I must stress, it's so important at the early stages of writing songs that you get those splits in writing, in agreement, because the biggest reason why bands break up is somebody gets disgruntled about the splits. So, you know, from a publishing point of view, there are different ways of doing it, but ultimately you've got to work it out between yourselves. That's the best way to do it, and get everybody agreement. Generally, it's not generally, what a horrible word to say. I was going to say about drummers, you know, like say, yeah, well, I did the feel and all that sort of stuff. Well, the feel is not melody and lyrics. The feel is part of the recording. So that's a completely different royalty. But he also may have suggested that there is a hook line that he used in the chorus, and I love you, baby. Thank you very much. The drummer came up with that. Well, he should get a share of that publishing. Well, you know, you work it out. You work it out. It's not difficult, but it can, when you become successful, trust me, I've seen it. It's ugly.
Oh yeah, it's something I get a huge amount of queries about, and I think, you know, it's best to register it correctly with APRA AMCOS, like with just the writers, register it correctly with the organisation, because it technically shouldn't change. So with band members changing and whatnot, you know, that registration should remain the same, and then you can have a band agreement to say that, you know, whatever happens to the income, that's a separate thing, you know, and all bands should have a band agreement which go through everything that happens within the band, and royalties one aspect of that. Yeah, that's just from APRA AMCOS point of view, and all the queries I get about it.
I mean, the reason why APRA have a conflict department is exactly that, because we say, well, hold on, excuse me, I wrote 25%. Well, did you have an agreement? well, no, but I wrote 25%. And you go, well, so he says, she says, it goes into conflict resolution, and all of a sudden nobody gets paid anything because it's in conflict.
Yeah.
So you can avoid all that by having it done right up front.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll just flick down a question about taxi. Have you heard of services such as taxi where songwriters pay a submission or subscription fee to write to specific briefs, and is there any legitimacy to these services?
The answer is yes, I have heard of them, and I know there's an enormous amount of music that goes through taxi, and they have, on their website a lot of success stories. I am yet to really see any major success with them at all. It's a numbers game, and they're out there pushing as much as they can, effectively working as a sync agency. So if they get a brief and your song's right for that brief and they pitch it and it gets picked, that's fine. But again, I'm not going to bag them. They're a company that are obviously operating, and they are operating, and they are still operating. So therefore, something must be working for them. But I am aware of them. But there's a lot of them. All I can say is that make sure if you are looking at that and you're offered a contract and they want to use you, get some legal advice from a copyright lawyer so they can look over the agreement and make sure that it's right for you, and you're not making sure that you're going to be in trouble later down the track. So it's important to get legal advice for people that understand this business. Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you don't know where to go to, the Arts Law Centre of Australia is a good place to start.
Yeah.
They have music and because you need a music or entertainment specialist who understands this business. So Arts Law Centre of Australia.
Absolutely.
Okay, so does assigning music to a publisher mean you hand over the rights to your music?
You don't hand over the rights, you assign your rights, which is pretty much like, if you think about it as being, you own a unit and I want to rent it. So effectively what I'm doing is I'm living in your unit and I'm paying you for that privilege. So effectively you assign your rights to me for me to represent you as a writer in all things to do with publishing. And that will be for the term of whatever that agreement is. And there are certain provisions within an agreement. And again, this is where the lawyers come in, the copyright lawyers come in, is looking at that agreement. My agreements have been looked at by, I think, everybody in this country. And they've morphed and things, but people suggest things and I go, yeah, that's a great idea, that's not a great idea, or that's contestable, whatever. But the fact is that it's really important. I've even lost the train of thought here, where we're going with this.
Does assigning music to a publisher mean you hand over the rights?
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, no, you're just assigning them for us to use for a contracted period.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, question about percentages. So is 15% for publishing administration reasonable?
Oh, gee. Look, there are some companies that are doing even better than that. But if you just want somebody to distribute your music, basically do the administration for you and do nothing else, and you're just a writer, I'm not entirely sure why you would want to sign an administration deal, unless you're seriously doing generating income that is enough for it to say, well, look, I need somebody to do this because I'm released globally and I want them to keep track of it, and therefore I want the best possible deal I'm doing. So if you have that sort of profile, then if you're paying, paying a 15% commission, for an administration, then I'd say that's probably okay. But it depends on the conditions. It depends on where you are as far as your career is concerned and your writing is concerned. If you happen to be Paul McCartney, for example, he's probably got one of the best deals in the world, and he doesn't pay a lot of commission on that. So he retains a lot of the money. Not everybody's Paul McCartney, obviously. But if you're a fledgling musician, I'm not sure whether there's many deals out there that are offering only a 15% commission. And I assume that you're meaning paying 15% as opposed to receiving 15%. Because if it's receiving 15%, run away.
Yeah. Okay, so this is kind of, you know, we've covered this stuff, but I guess if there's any other hot tips in terms of, like, the question is, if publishers balk at unsolicited material being sent to them, then how does a newbie break into the publishing licensing process? Are there some informal avenues?
Well, as I said before, why don't you drop a line to the publishers and say, listen, I've got this song and these are the reasons why I'd really like to send in, because I think you may be interested. And after you've done some research about the publishers, send them an email, and it's easy to find out who the right person is to send, and ask that whether they would accept songs to be sent to them, say 2 or 3 songs, to get some feedback. I think most publishers are pretty acceptable to that. It's just that for legal reasons, they just don't accept unsolicited material. But once you've actually got over that hurdle, then it's an opportunity to actually do it. I get emails from people all the time, and people say, can I send you something? And I go, yeah, send it to me, that's fine. I have it documented anyway. I listen to it, I give them feedback, and we go from there. We either do something or we don't do something. And I think most publishers are pretty much like that.
Yeah, cool. And someone wants to know an example of the longevity of value, so regarding songs and publishing. The longevity of value.
Well, I'm not entirely sure what that means, other than the fact that if you take a recording and you take publishing as concerned, a new recording has a life cycle, and that's where it goes from release to success to back catalogue to streaming back catalogue to disappearance. Publishing has the opportunity for the writer to be covered by a multitude of people in different types of ways, and it completely it can live basically for a long period of time. I mean, just listen to any classical, even though a lot of the classical music is out of copyright. Listen to classical music. I mean, there is the publishing side. If you like classical music, it's played by every orchestra in the world, but you won't hear the original recording, and that's probably a bad analogy. But ultimately, say Yesterday as a song, which is credited to Lennon and McCartney, although McCartney was the only one that wrote it. It's a Lennon-McCartney composition that has been covered about 3,000 times. Commercially, it's been released. So every time that is played, used in any way, or recorded, Paul McCartney and John Lennon's estate then get paid royalties for the use of that composition, because that's their composition. And that's the beauty of publishing. So publishing has a lifetime, which is 70 years past the death of the last living composer. And the recording has as long as somebody wants to listen to it.
Yeah, and just with that, maybe the retention, if you can talk about the term and the retention period.
Yeah, well, a retention period is after the contract is concluded. And so let's say it's a 5-year contract. It's included, but there is a retention period of X amount of years that some contracts will say. That could be because it's unrecouped. So therefore, the retention period will last for as long as money is outstanding. Or it could be there's generally a retention period for pipeline income, which is income that may have been accrued overseas but not paid through. So really that's where the retention period comes in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I better fire through these last couple of questions. Is Lollybox like taxi?
Lollybox is a new and, as a matter of fact, it's WA born and bred as a facility. It's due to get running if it's not already. I know a little bit about it, and I have seen the way that it's worked in a beta format, and I'm going to say I'm really, really impressed with it from a sync agency point of view, and I think when it gets up and running, it will be a great one, particularly because it's Western Australia.
Mm-hmm. Publishing of a connoisseur, I think. Okay, so are there any publishing trends songwriters should be aware of in 2020, i.e. since the pandemic? Publishing trends.
No, look, other than the fact that one of the things that the pandemic has certainly brought up is the live streaming of gigs from their lounge room. And that's brought up a whole raft of new world things. I think it's here to stay. I think it's a brilliant thing for writer performers that are doing it. And so that's a new trend. So if you are a writer performer, I think there's an opportunity there because there is actually revenue to be made from those live streaming, and that's very new world stuff. We're still coming to grips with what that's all about. So I can't even give you an example of what sort of rates or what's coming out of that. All I can say is the technology and behavior is going a lot faster than the understanding of how we monetize it.
Yeah, and just on that, if you might notice you can actually put in a live stream claim, which is a brand new thing that we created because of this, because people weren't able to perform live in front of a live audience. So if you did do some live streaming shows and go to the APRA AMCOS website, there is a live stream claim form that is going to be open, I believe, for the rest of the year. So you can pop in your info there and receive royalty from that. Now, I don't know if this is, we're at time, 7:30, but there's a couple of other questions. So maybe we can cover those couple that are still sitting
Sure.
there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless if it just all shuts down and disappears, then, but I think we're all right for a time being.
Yeah.
Someone wants to know how publishing is different from licensing. Yeah, so a bit confused between the definition of them, publishing and licensing.
Well, licensing, if you're licensing a track, okay, well, it depends on who's doing it. So if you're licensing a track yourself to somebody, it's a front-end fee license. So you're licensing it for an amount of money, but it doesn't necessarily mean, and if that then is film, television, advertising, as I mentioned before, there's a back-end royalty, which is a performance royalty that comes through APRA. From a publishing point of view, publishing is all about looking after your performance, your mechanicals, your synchronization, your print music publishing, and all of those areas. So you assign the rights to a publisher, and then they look after all the elements for you. I should have mentioned before, one of the keys for the reason why you would want a publisher, or you should think of a publisher, is the fact that because publishers every day are dealing with licensing of music, is they understand also the value and what your music is worth. If you've never done it before and you're approached by somebody, or you approach somebody with your music, the fact that you don't do this on a regular basis is it's going to be really hard to quote, and the chances are that you will underquote, and therefore you will not achieve what you necessarily should achieve by going through a publisher whose job is really to license music. That's what they do. They're the professionals. So,
and just the royalties, someone is asking for an explanation between the difference between like publishing and recording in greater detail. So if they're recording song, if their recorded song is played on the radio,
yes.
what's is payment received based on the recording, or is it based on the songwriting splits?
Well,
so I guess the two different.
Yeah, well, as you said earlier, you know, in your introduction, you know, there's the two, which is the PPCA for the recording, and there's APRA for the APRA performance royalty, which is for the broadcast royalties, which are performance. So that's for the composition. PPCA is for the recording. So they're the two royalties that happen. You need to register with them.
Yeah. Okay, I think there's one last, oh no, there's two. With major labels set to invest heavily in intellectual property, there seems to be a huge confidence in the long-term income stream from publishing. Is now the best time to sync new music, or are they mainly interested in high-performing songs?
Well, obviously, high-performing songs are what particularly producers and music supervisors are looking for, but they can't always afford it. So there's always record companies and publishers are investing in music all the time, in both up-and-coming, developing, established and megastar level. So virtually all of the companies, all of the major companies are shareholder based, and so therefore, you know, they found through streaming that the royalty income is absolutely massive. So it's in their interest to try and be competitive and make sure they sign the next big thing.
Cool. And this is actually the last question sitting there at the moment. If I get a music video made for one of my songs, should the film producer get publishing royalties too? For example, if I was to put it on YouTube and make money from it, from ads?
Well, it's not my area of expertise, but just from a logical point of view, I would say no. If the producer is being paid, but to produce the video clip, I would think that that's his payment. However, I'm not au fait with the IP part of that as far as his payment is concerned, or whether there's an opportunity for him to claim any of that. But from an artistic point of view, you own the copyright and also the IP in the film clip and the music. So therefore, I would think, unless you have an agreement with the producer because you couldn't afford to pay for it, so therefore you give him a part of it, then maybe that's something, but that would be a side agreement, and I would not think it would be the norm.
Yeah, no, I would pay them for that service, and that'd be it. But like you say, if you can't afford the fee, then you come to other arrangements and deals. And do you register video clips through APRA? No, you don't register the video clips, but the song. So it's the musical work that's on the clip that's registered with APRA. So that musical work. And then if that, but if the video clip gets used, then it's we can collect the royalties from the use of the song. But it's very much the use of the song. So and that goes to the songwriters, composers, or publishers if there is a publisher. And one question we didn't get to about, if someone came to you and said they only write lyrics, do publishers sign lyricists only, or do they need to find someone to put the music to?
Sorry, just repeat that again.
Do you, if someone only writes lyrics, would you sign someone for that, or do they need to come to you with a complete work?
Look, this is a really interesting one. Personally, from an independent publishing point of view, I don't sign lyricists at all. However, history is littered with lyricists that collaborated with melody writers and created absolute magic. So I would suggest that if you are a lyricist, that you find somebody that you like musically and try and team up with them. The beauty about the internet now, of course, is the fact that they don't have to be in your backyard. They're in a global backyard, and you can connect with people all over the world and co-write with them and say, look, I've got these lyrics, I really like what you're doing, would you have a go at putting some melody to it? And then you would negotiate it from there. And I think that's the way to do it, and you're more likely to get an interest. I would think there is a reluctance from publishers in general to sign lyric writers unless they have some form of, they already have somebody that is a great melody writer or a score writer or something like that, and they're looking for lyrics. Perhaps there may be an opportunity there. But to sign a lyricist straight up, I think that's it's not normal.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's
cool.
hard to make any revenue, and to be callous about it, it's hard to make a revenue out of a lyricist because there's no output. There's just words on a page.
Mm-hmm.
So you need the melody to carry the lyrics.
Yeah. And there's a comment that says, it's just saying thank you, and that we're fortunate to have publishers like you in the industry representing AMCOS. So that's really lovely. That's
Thanks, Mum.
a really lovely way to a lovely way to end.
No, thank you. Look, I know there was really, this is, Tenille, you know this as well as I do. This is an incredibly involved part of the industry. You could talk for hours on this, and this is the sort of thing that WAMCON would normally do, these type of things where we'd sit around and we would talk and we'd have the speed dating, etc., and do that sort of thing. But there is so much to talk about that, and we only had a short period of time. I hope people got something out of it. I would like, if you want to know further, I'm more than happy for you to email me, and you can do that at clive@perfectpitchpublishing.net. I'm happy to respond to you on that sort of thing. I thank you very much for tuning in. It was great, Tenille, and thank you also for hosting.
That's all right. Yeah, thank you again. Thanks everyone for coming and for your questions, and again to WAM for organising this session, and Claire and Honor who are on board. I don't know if they wanted to jump in and pass anything on for the end of the session. I can see Claire there now.
Hey everyone, great discussion. Thank you so much, Tenille and Clive. Always so many golden insights, and as you say, so much more to talk about as well. I just wanted to say as well, if anyone has any questions more directed to WAM or just about the session generally, feel free to hit me up at claire@wam.org.au as well. So yeah, thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks everyone. There's a lot of messages of thanks coming through, so that's lovely.
Cool.
Appreciated.
Thank you. Yeah.
Cheers. Have a great night.
Okay. See you later, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.